Yeah, if there was only one Baha'i group, this wouldn't be any fun. It wouldn't be like an alternate thing to talk about. But because there's 7 groups, God has a sense of humor. They said Imam Ali had that duraba and his loving kindness. So, God's playful, and people take some of these things maybe a little bit too seriously. The reason that they're called Bahais under the provisions of the covenant is this is the title that Dr. Jensen chose in order to explain to the public what it was he was doing. And under the provisions of the covenant means that this is the only group of people who still associate with the legitimate and authentic members of the Holy Family. None of the other groups continue in with the members of the Holy Family. Now, that we all agree that all of the members of the Holy Family had broken the covenant and left the faith by the time of the ministry of Shoghi Effendi. But there were 3 members of the Holy Family left, not 2. There was Abdulbaha's son, Mason ریمی, his nephew, Shoghi Effendi, and his niece-in-law, Ria Khanum. So when Shoghi Effendi passed on, there were only 2 members of the Holy Family left, and Ria Khanum doesn't fulfill the criteria, so we're under the provisions of the covenant, meaning we accept Mason Rími, and then his adopted son, Pepe, and then his adopted son, who's the current president now. And this test will happen again. Every time there's a changing of the coming of the guardianship in the Bahai Faith, or the designated emblem of the House of Justice, the sign of God, to recognize the true House of Justice from fakes, frauds, and imitations. Anytime there's this changing of the guard, the community of believers goes through the death, resurrection, and renewal inside of their spiritual evolution. And when they recognize the next successor, they graduate from 3rd grade and go to 4th grade. Then they graduate from 4th grade and go to 5th grade. The point of the covenant is the thing that is the cause of unity and Baha'i solidarity and Tawheed for us people of the oneness of God, the Muwahhidin, that accept these things. And when the day of the covenant appears, this is the day of the great dividing. The covenant, on the day of the covenant, doesn't create unity. With the passing of Bahaullah, and it became the day of the covenant. And the Baha'is split into many different sects. But the people who adhered and remained under the provisions of the covenant to the person of Abdulbaha, that was the unity of Baha'i solidarity. When Abdulbaha ascended, we had the day of the covenant again, the day of the great dividing. Half the people rejected Shoghi Effendi, the other half accepted him. Then they had Baha'i unity again. So the Baha'i faith goes through a process of expansion and consolidation. This happens every day in our personal tests and in the tests of the epoch of the faith during the administrations of the different presidents of the House of Justice or the ministries of the sacred figures. And that's the other thing, that the writings of Baha'u'llah and Abdulbaha in Persian and Arabic that are similar to classical Arabic, like the Holy Quran, as you mentioned, the King James Bible, which has a Shakespearean poetic Old English flow to it, these should be preserved in the original language and appreciated for what they are and how that they're revealed in this tone. But the messages from the presidents of the House of Justice or the current House of Justice itself, the letters that have been written by the president, the current president of the House of Justice, the documents that Dr. Leland Jensen wrote, the writings of Charles Mason Rími that are quite extensive, over 100 volumes of things that he's written, as well as published books, and even the things of Shoghi Effendi. You just say it in plain English and translate it into modern Arabic and modern Farsi. For God's sakes, if we want to read these and thous, I want that in the holy prayers. people want to talk to each other again using these and thous, that's up to them. I don't mind that. But to put on airs and pretensions of being saved or holy or spiritual, this is silly. That the purpose of a government is, which is what the House of Justice is with the Davidic kingship, is to serve the people and to speak in plain English and to attempt to make things as simple and concise as possible when it comes to giving guidance and directives. And just in describing these deeper spiritual things that we have, we're going to get a little bit more detailed, but we still try to be less wordy. But the main thing that we're trying to do is inject the spirit and make a penetration into the hearts, minds, and souls of the people. Once a penetration is made, and they can accept the fact that Mason ریمی is a member of the Holy Family, just like Khanum, and there's no difference, and he fulfills the criteria in the Will and Testament, it's the President of the House of Justice, that one penetration of that one fact will transform the person. So we have to be able to be use our intellect to recognize the truth, but have to have that pure heart to accept it. So that's why we're called Bahais under the provisions of the covenant. We're the only group of people who has remained with the legitimate, non-excommunicated members of the Holy Family. I can't be non-excommunicated members of the Holy Family. You know, God has a sense of humor. This whole world should be a garden in which we live free and are able to do our work and grow food and be with our families, get an education, have job opportunities, and even arguments and sporting events and different types of lively discussions about things that we're passionate about without them resulting into war between the nations. So the only thing that we're really working toward today in our generation, that I'm working toward and the work that I do in the current administration, is we'd like to see all the people of the world accept one simple thing. And that is that war will no longer be a means for the settlement of human problems. That's all. People don't need to convert to the Bahai Faith. Christianity suggests we should have a way to solve human problems without war. Judaism's in favor of it. Islam's in favor of it. And the Bahai Faith brings a way that we can do this. But the people don't have to become, quote unquote, Bahais to simply agree internationally that we will not have war to settle problems anymore. That's pretty simple. Now, if everybody agreed to that, the next thing is, well, then how are we going to settle our problems? Well, we have to have a meeting and talk about how that would work. And all of the revelations of all the holy books should be consulted. The Baha'i books, the Buddhist books, the Hindu books, the Christian books, the Jewish books, the Muslim books, the Native American indigenous teachings of different people should be consulted. Everything should be consulted when they come to meet. But the first agreement is simply, we agree not to use war to settle human differences. That's all. That's it. That's the universal religion. We're all human beings. We're not going to have war amongst each other anymore internationally. If two people want to get in a fist fight, I'm not talking about that. If Zayd wants to punch Abid in the nose and Abid wants to punch Zayn back, well, that's just on them, and that's not going to disrupt life on Earth. But we have to have an international removal of war. So war will no longer be the method for settling disputes in human relationships. That's it. That's the religion. That's the covenant. Nothing more.